Everybody Hates Rand is a Wheel of Time podcast that will contain spoilers for all 14 books. So if you're anti-spoiler, stop this, read all 14 books, and come back. We'll be here, waiting.
Our title is a joke and is meant to be taken as such. Everybody in this context refers to us and our cats. You are free to feel however you want about Rand. He's a fictional character. Please don't DM us.
The world is a mess, Dark One stretching out his hand. The dragon's reborn, the fire's been fanned, but everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand.
This has been such a mixed bag of a cold open.
Somewhere in there, something good.
There's a real roller coaster. This is Everybody Hates Rand, your friendly neighborhood Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Emily Jushaw.
I'm Sally Goodger. Before we start, several people have asked us to address the fact that we are skipping Path of Daggers.
Aw, dang.
So as much as Emily would love to continue her joke,
It's a good joke. Sorry if you don't get it. My new age humor.
She's a comedian, you guys.
I'm a comedian, and if you don't get it, then that's too bad.
So I will try to address this in like 30 seconds or less. Yes, we are for the time being skipping Path of Daggers. We felt like we needed a kind of like mental reset as we go into the second half of the series, which is infamously known for being kind of a slog. So we decided that Path of Daggers, there really isn't a whole lot that happens in that book. So if we were going to lessen the load, Path of Daggers was a good one to skip. And it was very funny to skip Path of Daggers without any comment.
Yeah, so yeah, you nailed it.
Thank you.
People have asked if we were skipping it because Matt isn't in it. That was a contributing factor.
That was a contributing factor.
But it is perfectly aligned with the main factor, which is that Path of Daggers, we're not missing much by skipping it.
Yes.
And Matt is obviously like a comic relief character, and a lot of what is good to talk about in this series.
Yes.
I know where like Matt stands or whatever. We won't be as much in the later half of this series. He's not as good. But like it sometimes, especially when we are talking as much as we are about the problems that this book series has, we don't like feeling like we have a ton of negative energy. And so Matt is like a bright spot sometimes where we can talk about funny things that happen. So yeah, the fact that he's not in a book is like, okay, well, there's really not going to be any highs in this book.
Yeah, and like, I remember when I was blogging about Path of Daggers, every week I would be like, sorry this one was such a downer, guys. Like, I just feel like I didn't have anything good to say about the book. It is mostly just like...
Sorry for that noise. That was Tybalt walking right in front of the microphone.
His little tail just thumped it a little bit. So, yeah, we just would be a very, like, criticism-heavy season and not a lot of highlights. So, yeah, we're just leaving it. And maybe we'll come back to it, or maybe we won't. So...
But for now, we're skipping it, and I think we feel like if there was anything important that happened in Path of Daggers, then it will come up by necessity as we are talking about the Squeakquels.
Yes, I can think of, like, literally off the top of my head, just 3 events. Cleansing of the Bowl of the Winds, Egg gets war powers, Rand fights the Shanshin.
Yeah, and then there's the whole Ashman betrayal.
Oh, yeah.
At the end, I guess.
See, I forgot.
And Faile gets kidnapped. Which, by the way, I want to clarify something, because I was graffitiing a copy of Path of Daggers this week. I don't believe anyone has told Perrin yet that the Shanshin and Masima are meeting. What happened was that Faile and her party of women, or maybe just Faile, I don't know, received word as they were out hunting.
Okay.
I think, like, 2 of her gals, you know, Lucille and Arella came up to tell her that, and that's why they were with them.
Okay.
So, Faile is aware of it. Presumably, Berylene is also aware of it, but has not yet told Perrin, because, to be honest, she probably knew that he would not care at this time. But hopefully he will find that out soon.
Yes.
But for now, we're with Faile.
And, Lord, I wish we weren't.
Excuse me. Yeah, it's a downer. So I, like, the entire time reading it was like, what am I going to talk about?
Yeah,
what is there to talk about? Here's what happens in the plot. We catch up with Faile as, there's a sort of montage quality to what's going on for the first little bit, as she and the other women with whom she was kidnapped are taken, in an unknown direction, presumably toward the greater Shadow Force, which Faile at first estimates to be in the low hundreds, because she assumes that it would be very difficult for a much larger group to pass unnoticed. She's not reckoning on the fact that Samael opened gateways to a bunch of, random spots throughout the countryside. However, that did happen at least a few weeks ago, so It is a little bit weird that...
Yeah, nobody's seen them and accounted for them.
Yeah, that the Shadow are all meeting up into this more conglomerate group again without really noticing. Especially because although the Ale are supposed to be, like, masters of camouflage and whatnot, and moving about unnoticed, even in large groups, like, Faile and others specifically note that the Ale are not adapted to the snow, the cold winter.
Yeah, they're not even wearing, like, white camouflage.
Yeah, they're still in their desert camo.
And also, like, it reaches a saturation point where you just, like, can no longer hide that many bodies.
Yeah, like what?
Like, if you're traveling with 40,000 people or whatever, someone's going to notice.
I understand your random Amadisian peasant is a little bit distracted by the Shanshan invasion from the southwest and Massima's whole thing.
Yeah, Amadis is really going through it.
Up in the north. But you would still, like, notice if 1,000 random Ale passed by outside. You'd be like, huh.
Well,
that's a new development.
Yeah, and I mean, this was, like...
As if this couldn't get worse.
Yeah, and I mean, gossip is, like, the hottest commodity there is in, like, feudal, pre-technological society. Pre-technological, there was no time before technology, but, like...
Yeah.
Before, like, phones and shit.
Before smartphones.
So if I was just the local Amadisian peasant being like, you know what would be hilarious? Going down to the local bar and being like, guess what I saw today?
You guys, guess what? All 19 of my cousins were kidnapped by the Shadow Ale. Presumably that's the only explanation, is that everyone who sees the Ale is immediately kidnapped by them.
Savannah's like, I'm taking them. No witnesses.
Yeah, no witnesses.
Yeah.
Taken. Featuring Sevanna, but it's like a reverse Taken.
She's taking everybody.
Slap down the Uno reverse card.
Instead of saving your daughter, she's taking everyone.
Yeah, that's what Liam Neeson should have done. Turn the tables on the kidnappers. I'm kidnapping you.
Kidnapping the kidnappers?
Yeah. Putting them all in a warehouse. Now what? Now what will you do?
What are you going to do?
Not so fun, is it?
Maybe next time you invite Pam.
Maybe next time you invite Pam. Maybe next time you invite Liam.
Yeah. Maybe Liam Neeson wanted to get taken.
What's his characters?
I don't.
I mean, he doesn't have a character. It's like when Nicolas Cage is in movies.
It's just Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, Liam Neeson. Okay. Back to plot. Faile was kidnapped with Alejandra, Magdan, Bane and Chiad, and her 2 members of Cha Faile. Lasil and Arella. All of these, they have been kidnapped by a mixture of maidens and what is called the Siswe Daman, which are the guys who heard the big news about the Ale, way back in book 4, and were like, peace out, and started wearing their red headbands things. They're basically social outcasts in a weird way. Mm-hmm. But also we don't get a lot of Ale points of view on the matter, so it remains a topic of some confusion, at least for me. But these people have kidnapped them, taken off all their clothes in the form of Guy Shane, and are just, like, trekking them through the snow. Faile is immediately concerned. Faile is very pragmatic in this sequence, which does make her, at least for me, a little bit more refreshing to read. I enjoy characters who are problem-solving.
Yeah.
Even when they cannot solve the problem.
Yeah, at least she's, like, acting in some way. Even if that's just making plans.
Yeah, she's thinking, she's very focused on survival from the get-go. And on her people's survival insofar as that is in her power. So she's worried about freezing. She is a northern gal, Canadian in those terms. So she knows how dangerous snow can be. And she's worried about frostbite, her fingers and toes and face getting affected by that. And also, just healing over from hypothermia.
Yeah.
So she is doing her best to, tense her muscles as she walks, to, keep blood flowing. Eventually, though, their feet start bleeding because they are walking barefoot in the snow, which is, snow freezes over the top and gets icy.
Yeah.
At which point, when the ale, I guess, realize that their feet are bleeding or are being too slowed down by them to continue, they just pick them up and keep moving.
Yep.
Faile again tries to stay awake, but eventually passes out from cold and exhaustion, but wakes up, on blankets, with the rest of them being fed some, tea by another guy, Shane, who is ale. And who is yeah, they dishonored you. They showed that you're weak by having to carry you. And Faile's Faile's not like this, but I'm buddy, they should be dead.
Yeah.
I don't know how to tell you this. They should be dead.
Yep.
But you can't walk through the snow or be carried in cold weather that is cold enough for snow for what seems to have been upwards of 12 hours.
Yeah.
Naked and not die.
Yeah.
That's exposure. It's called exposure.
Mm-hmm. I've read that story, that Jack London story about the man in the snow.
Oh yeah, the guy who's trying to light the matches at the very end.
Yeah.
And he's all bundled up.
I've read it. It's terrifying. So I'm an expert having read one Jack London story. So I can solidly say that all these women should be dead.
Yeah, we're not scientists, and neither of us has any particular experience in uber cold weather.
No.
Utah doesn't often drop below freezing, or even below 10 degrees. But it does drop to those much lower temperatures, and I can't really...
It's it's just one of, not to, hash out the reality of this fantasy story, but it's one of these things that's, it starts to lean into the little bit of the, racism we talked about with the ale, where they're just,
Oh, I can't wait to talk about the racism. I've got some thoughts.
Where they're just inhuman to the point of being unaffected by such mortal things as exposure to the cold and exhaustion.
Yeah, the ale live in a desert, which gets very cold at night, so on some level they are better suited than, I don't know, about most people.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be better suited than Saldeans, who
No.
do live in the extreme north. But they theoretically can cope with some amount of cold.
Yeah.
But snow is a whole different...
Yeah, snow and ice and freezing temperatures
Yeah.
are different than just cold.
Yeah, snow fucks you up, because now you're wet as well as cold.
Yep.
So, I'm just, I don't want to be oh, Gary Paulson over here, you should be dead, but you should be dead.
But you should be dead. That's another one of my credentials. I've also read Hatchet.
Yeah.
It's just...
Does it get cold in Hatchet?
I probably a little bit, but I don't think it happens in the winter. I think it happens in the summer.
And he manages to escape
Before the winter. It's just one of those frustrating things about, I think in the fantasy genre in general, there tends to be maybe a little bit of cherry picking of what reality you will pay attention to and what reality you won't.
Yeah, and
which is fine.
It's sort of all fiction, does that.
That's fair. Yeah. Fiction is fiction.
Yeah, the author gets to choose whether his characters live or die.
Yeah.
But it does become a little bit ridiculous that, I don't know, they haven't suffered... I guess I could believe that they live, but I don't really believe that they would live without severe problems.
Yeah, frostbite.
Yeah, losing some digits, losing the nose, something like that. Also, this is just a little nitpicky pet peeve, but Robert Jordan is a dude writing this, because the long hair would be such a constant problem in this scenario. Robert Jordan never notes that the women, have hair ties to tie their hair back. Hair is another thing that gets wet and freezes.
Yes.
So they would be slapping. You'd be slapping your hair out of the way. You'd be constantly managing your hair. I just was bothering me, I guess.
No, and what I was gonna say when I was talking about, like, cherry picking is it just gets a little old in books, I think, especially like this, where it's like, we have to absolutely be, loyal to, like, the verisimilitude of battle or fighting or
human meat grinder.
Yeah. But yet we'll have women just, like, very delicately naked in the snow.
I have a theory on this.
Survive without being quote unquote maimed by it.
Yes, I have a theory, but we'll get to it after I finish the plot.
Okay. Sorry. Keep going.
No, it's fine. So they're resting. Faile can see over the crest of a hill what she describes as an endless river of people. More on this later. But this seems to be, as we are told, 7 out of 50-something sets of the Shadow Ale that have come together and are now moving in tandem. Somehow, miraculously, we are still with the group of wise ones, which includes Sevanna and Galena. So yes, don't tell me that Faile and the rest of them get healed. Healing can't fix frozen digits falling off, which they should have had.
Well, yeah, and also, like, whatever. Continue.
As they're sitting there recuperating, Tharava, Somarin, who's just another wise one, and Galena come up. Another nitpicky thing, it takes Faile quite a while to make note of Galena's Aes Sedai ring, to mark her as Aes Sedai. Aes Sedai always have the ageless face. Galena has used the oath rod, so she should have the ageless face. I don't know why. We just threw that out the window as soon as Robert Jordan didn't like it, or forgot. Tharava is immediately an imposing figure. She's like, who the fuck are these people? Alejandra gets up and is like, I'm a queen. I'm a queen. And you have not only me, but my liege lady.
Oh, I know.
And Faile's like, I'm gonna throttle this bitch. Like,
smack.
Haven't you heard? Haven't you heard about survival mechanisms?
And Alejandra's like, no.
Make yourself as unnoticeable as possible.
Yeah, don't start.
I do lose a little bit of patience with Faile's lack of empathy for some of the other people she's with. I understand it, but it is a little bit frustrating. Alejandra has never been in any situation like this before. We know Alejandra's a survivalist. She's very good at adapting to situations. That's how she survived Mossima.
Yeah.
But she's never dealt with anything like this before. And it is, if she doesn't know about the Ale, which she doesn't, she is unfamiliar with their culture or anything about them. Never met them, except for presumably the few with Faile.
Yeah.
Hasn't immersed herself in their culture. To her, she's just been kidnapped, and she is a person who can guarantee a large ransom.
Yeah.
So she's working on a pretty operable theory there.
Yes, I agree. Like, it's frustrating, of course, coming from Faile's point of view. Faile, who understands what's going on a little bit better. But yeah, Alejandra's like, I'm gonna play what I think is a winning hand.
And they're like, oh, no, that doesn't interest us. But actually, it interests Sevanna, who is collecting rich and famous people, or whatever the fuck these evil people always do. Very Graendal of her.
Yeah. Graendal Lite.
Diet Graendal. Excuse me, Graendal no sugar. 0 sugar.
Graendal 0 sugar.
Speaking of Sevanna, she comes up and is like, oh, a queen? I love queens. I love making them weep.
She's such a freak.
She's such a freak. And is just like, I mean, I can't remember the order of operations here, but we are introduced to Sevanna as a person who is in control of Galena. Galena's also terrified of Tharava, who is very clearly abusive toward her. Galena's a mess.
Yeah.
Huge mess because of what has been done to her in the last few months. And we have already spoken about Robert Jordan punishing women characters, so we won't linger too much on that. Faile does at one point ask the guy Shane who's helping her, like, we're not ale. You guys shouldn't be taking guy Shane. And he's basically like, shrug emoji.
He's like, you're right, but what am I
it's
gonna
not my
do about
problem.
it?
And she's like, shouldn't you guys be helping us escape? Like, if you're an all honorable ale, then you would not allow this. And he's like, I'm Guy Shane. It's part of my honor to be Guy Shane for the next 6 months or however. Yeah. So Faile cannot expect help in any major way from any of the ale Guy Shane, which includes Bane and Chiad, which is a bit annoying.
Yeah.
Bane and Chiad do, to their credit, help as much as they feel that they are able to.
Yeah, but they're like, we're not going to escape.
Yeah, they're
so
like,
we won't be coming with you, so we can't help you in that way, but
well, we don't think it's fair or correct what's happened,
right.
So. But that is a later issue. Galena, on someone's orders, heals Faile and the rest, and basically they get up and join. They're given clothes, Guy Shane robes and shoes and whatnot, and then go join the big parade of people. Faile ends up with Alejandra and Magdin. She gets separated from the others for a while. They spend a while looking for them, but can't. And finally they're just like, we'll just have to find them in the evening. Magdin, quote-unquote Magdin, immediately asserts herself as someone who's not going to act like a servant in this scenario. Not that she was very good at that to begin with.
Yeah.
In fairness. But she's basically like, we've been kidnapped, we're prisoners, until we're out of this situation, I'm not following any rules of class,
Yeah.
Which is fair enough, except that she's also a queen. It would be hilarious if Magdin was an actual peasant woman.
Yeah.
Who was just like, fuck this.
Yeah, look, the class structure does not apply, we're all prisoners.
Yeah, but instead it's just Morgause being like, I want to behave like my usual royal bitch self, so...
And so I will.
And I have a logical argument backing me up. Okay, whatever.
Whatever. Magdin.
Yeah.
Air quotes.
Faile and the others are outfitted with these jeweled belts and necklaces or whatever that mark them out as Sevanna's special Guy Shane. Because, like we said, they pick up on the fact that Sevanna is collecting people.
She's a material girl.
She's a material girl.
Material girl.
Material world. Faile, by the way, knows who Sevanna is, obviously, even though she wasn't there during the events of Fires of Heaven. She's well aware of the political and, martial, I guess we should say, history of what happened, and she is correct in presuming that Sevanna was always behind Couladin tugging the strings.
Yeah.
She's basically like, I want to kill Sevanna, and I will, if I can.
Bite her throat out or whatever.
Sevanna also recognizes Faile, not in person, but Faile gives her name as Faile to Ibarra, and Savannah's like, oh, I know that name. You're close to Randall Thor.
Tharava, I think is the one.
It's Tharava?
She's
like...
Oh,
right.
She's like, I won't tell, or it's Galena or somebody is like, I won't tell Sevanna who you are.
Tharava comes up to them and is like, so are you really a liege lady? Who are you? And Faile introduces herself, and Tharava's like, oh yeah, I recognize that name. Yeah. And I will tell Sevanna who you are unless you guys act as my spies in Savannah's tent. And just report on every little thing that she says. And the ladies are like, well, we obviously don't have a choice here. What? We have no negotiating power. Fine, whatever.
Yes.
And as Magdin, presumably because she has been in charge of spy rings like these, notes, probably every other servant working for Galena, Sevanna.
No, all the names are too similar.
All end with an ah sound. Everyone working for Sevanna is probably under the same orders by Tharava, so if they mess up at all, then someone else will. It will be obvious.
Yeah.
So they can't really hold back. So obviously that's already not a great position to be in, but then Galena comes up to them and is like, I'm an Aes Sedai, here on business of the White Tower, and Faile's like,
okay.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Who cares? Do I look like I care? And Galena's like, rude. Well, I just need you guys to, or is it Galena? Who knows who she is?
I think it's Galena who knows who she is. Because Tharava can be like, you're going to do what I tell you to, or I'm going to kill you.
Oh, yeah.
And then Galena's like, you're going to do what I tell you to, or I'm going to tell Sevanna who your husband is.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
There's all these women and all their plots.
And it's hard to keep track of, okay?
I'm just a stupid little man doing my dumb little podcast.
Galena is like, I want you guys to get this thing for me that's in Tharava's tent, which we know is the Oath Rod.
Yeah.
And the ladies are like, how do you want us to do that? And Galena's like, I don't know, figure it out. And Faile's like, oh, okay, this day might as well get worse, you know?
Well, you ever have those days?
Where you're like, Faile looks directly in the camera.
This might as well happen.
This might as well happen. So now they're in this weird, being tugged in 3 separate directions by 3 separate, powerful women, supposedly. I wouldn't call Galena powerful at any sense right now, but she does have this leverage.
Yeah.
So, that's the plot. They continue on their way, no idea about where their destination is going to be. And Faile the whole time is thinking, okay, Perrin's probably on his way, but I cannot rely on him finding us. I must plan a way to get us out of this. So very, practical and independent of her, which is one of her better qualities.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a couple things I want to say, and then if you have anything else to add, great.
Okay, lay it on me.
The racism
Oh.
part. So, we've talked, not at length, I think, but we have referenced that Robert Jordan does seem to have taken much of his inspiration for the ale from Native American cultures and history. That comes out a little bit strongly here in the colonial era, specifically. It was a thing for local native tribes to occasionally kidnap or assimilate or adopt white people, settlers, into their tribes. Of course, sometimes this was involuntary, but presumably at other times, and, there are people who stayed with them even when they had the option to leave.
Yeah.
Presumably, a lot of people found a lot of freedom and actual family in these adoptions. But there's a sort of... And that's how we get things like Dances with Wolves, by the way, which Rand has already given us his Dances with Wolves plotline, so we don't need to get too far into that. I know, the real tough one. But Robert Jordan is really playing into that specific 1800s settler mindset here. We mentioned last week that there's a sort of manifest destiny going on here in the need to eliminate the Shado Ale, remove the quote-unquote savages from this land that we view as ours. Obviously, this concept gets a little tough in this particular setting because the Shado do not belong on this part of the continent. They might have made their way here eventually, but they have been planted here by a bad guy, so...
Yeah.
It's a little tough. But there are some definite, white civilization against, indigenous populations vibes here. And those vibes are made a little bit stronger by this whole kidnapping sequence.
Yes.
Which is all about, not respecting the kidnappees' cultures and customs and just, forcing them to assimilate to the captor's customs. Mm-hmm. There's also the whole faceless horde thing. I don't know how long we can beat this dead horse, but there are truly far more Shado than makes a lick of sense. There's so many. Even adding the idea that they are maybe kidnapping the entire population of Amadicia as they move through it.
Yeah.
It's getting ridiculous. It has always been ridiculous.
It is absurd.
7 out of 56 equals an endless stream of people?
Literally an endless stream of people.
Come on. That Perrin apparently can't track? That's probably not true. I'm sure they'll find them pretty quickly, but... Or do they?
They don't find them in this book. They find them at the beginning of Crossroads of Twilight.
Oh,
and
great.
it actually takes them a lot longer than I think it should for them. They only find them when they really, settle into a place for a couple of weeks.
Gotcha.
So what the fuck is Perrin doing? Well, actually, I know what he's doing. He admits to it. He just starts he makes Grady and Neil start opening gateways at random.
Which is what he should have done from the beginning.
But then it makes them jump, like, it's really chaotic. But eventually he figures it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to jump back to what you said about, like, the kidnapping, because while I think it is true, I mean, of course, I don't think it's true. It is true what you're saying, that it's kind of really takes on the vibe of, like, settler colonialism in the Americas. But this idea that, like, the local people are going to kidnap you is just, like, such a colonial mindset in general. Like, seems to sort of permeate the literature, the writings about South America and Africa by European colonists.
I just read about American history all day.
So no, and I think it is very fair to say that the Ale pull a lot of Native American coding, especially when they are taken out of the desert and put into the quote-unquote European continent. Somehow they get more of these, like, wilderness vibes.
Yeah.
That seem like the Robert Jordan's like, well, the Native Americans know the wilderness, right? I'll just start pulling from there. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What's happening? At least that's kind of how it feels to me. And it's just this really funny... Not funny. It's really bad and racist what he's doing. But I also just, like, don't understand... I mean, I know he's trying to be like, the Shado are bad, but it has, like... And, like, they're doing things that aren't against the culture. But it's not like anyone in Ale society ever has been, like, coming across the mountain, kidnapping people, and taking them back to the waste.
No, and we're supposed to believe, for some reason, that because Sevanna said that she wants to start kidnapping random people, that the massive, apparently 7 million Shado Ale all are okay with that.
Yeah, and it's like... This thing that's never been a part of your culture ever.
Yeah, that is specifically anti your culture.
One woman with her big titties out said, kidnap all of Amadicia, and they were just like, yeah, okay.
And, like, yes, I understand that Sevanna has leverage over the other wise ones, and the wise ones are generally the real leadership, but I don't actually believe that at this point the wise ones would continue to back her up. It would be so easy for Tharava to just bang bang kill Sevanna.
Yeah, I know. Please.
For any of them to do it.
I'm
like,
begging you.
It's not hard to assassinate this random woman. She's going around on her own. But, you know, it's just like this ridiculous setup.
Yeah. It is fully ridiculous. But just continuing, I gotta keep my brain for 1 second. No, it's not your fault. It is my fault. But adding further to this sort of being kidnapped by the quote-unquote savages are the fact that all these women are naked. They're sort of this, like, latent...
That's my next thing.
They're sort of, like, this latent threat. Maybe not so latent when Faile is being carried by Roland, my arch nemesis.
Roland!
Who is, like, slapping her on the bum, because Robert Jordan loves to spank women. There's this sort of latent or not so latent threat of sexual assault.
Mm-hmm. Even though Faile is careful to tell us that they are being dehumanized to the point where she is not so worried about sexual assault.
Yeah.
They're just being treated like animals, which is not better.
No, Faile. Both of those things are bad, and also, like... I don't think being dehumanized to that point keeps you safe from sexual assault. In fact, I think it might
agree.
Make it more likely to happen. But what do I know? So it just also plays into this idea of, like, honestly, even though Faile is not a white woman, it plays into the sort of narrative of, like, a white woman's vulnerability, where she is being placed in this sort of, like... To use our world's terms, which I know are not particularly productive, she's sort of placed in the idea of, like, European society. And she's being kidnapped by the indigenous people who are just going to assault her. And that's just, I feel like, also a narrative that has been had, particularly around women being kidnapped.
Yeah, that's a narrative to propagate racism. That's also a narrative widely seen in romance as a genre, which is sort of my second point. Robert Jordan loves to put his male characters generally in situations befitting classic adventure or fantasy novels, and to put his female characters in situations befitting romance novels, which is why they are so frequently stripped naked and put in these mildly, like, if we just changed a few words, then this would be the foreplay to a romance novel, you know? If you're not familiar with romance as a genre, then, hey, just read these couple chapters and think, what if I added some, like, you know, more sexiness to it?
Yeah.
The women are all naked. It doesn't really matter that the people that are carrying them around are strangers. This is the perfect setup, quote unquote, for a you know, some sex.
Yeah, for a steamy affair in the snow, in the tent. When you finally realize that your captor is actually a very gentle person who has, like, a dog that he loves or something.
He loves his dog, therefore.
And this is no shade on the romance genre. Well, it's a little shade on the romance genre. Romance as a genre is getting a lot better and more progressive, the way a lot of things are, but not all of it.
Romance as a genre deals with a lot of tropes, including playing with consent.
Yeah.
In ways that you might find sexy, or in ways that some people might find skeevy, you know?
Yeah.
It just depends on the person. Romance plays with nudity, putting people in situations that could become sexy if you changed the context.
Yeah.
And if the context is a romance novel, then it probably will become sexy.
Yeah.
But it leads to, like, people being naked in improbable ways and scenarios. People having to share beds or things like that. Or, you know, the sleeping bag, also in improbable scenarios. This is exactly what happened with igloo sex.
Yeah, the sex igloo. I was going to say, we talked about this in the sex igloo, but somehow it seems like cold weather is frequently involved.
Yeah, I don't know if Robert
in
Jordan
order
was
to, like, make bodies close
it
together.
snowed and Robert Jordan had an insta-boner. He was like, God, I love the snow.
I love the snow. The snow means that surely a naked woman will appear and need warmth.
And he knew the snow biblically, but not at all in a rational way, because they should be dead. Academically, perhaps.
Why would you say something like that? Why would you do this? This podcast goes on the internet.
Yeah. You think that's gonna stop me now? I've said some regrettable things on this podcast.
Yes, we all have.
Knowing the snow biblically is not one of them.
Oh, you said it again!
I think it's such a funny joke. So, I don't know how familiar Robert Jordan was with the romance genre. Presumably pretty familiar if he is willing to engage with it to this extent. But if you're signed up for a fantasy series and not a romance series, then that's why things like this can come out of left field and feel so bizarre. And, like, really pull you out of the fantasy.
Yeah, especially because, this does not end in a romance. Faile, our main character throughout this arc, is forced into some really uncomfortable situations with men, but it's not like any of those men turn out to be her longtime lovers. She is still married and still loves her husband.
But it sure wants to make us believe that it might end with some sort of sexual contact.
Yeah.
Sexual contact with her kidnapper.
Yeah, with Roland.
Roland is not a character who goes away after slinging Faile over his shoulder and spanking her repeatedly. Roland remains, and Roland and Faile, for some reason, dance on this line of will they, won't they, which is egregiously upsetting when one is the kidnapper and the other the kidnappee. But I mean, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is if you are reading a romance novel or series, then you are signing up for a particular kind of fantasy where this scenario makes sense. If you're signed up for high fantasy, which is a different genre, then this sort of breaks conventions.
Yeah, a sort of similar, not exactly, but like a similar thing happens in Kushiel's Dart, also involving being out in the snow
Yeah,
somehow
classic.
being not nearly as clothed.
As
And
one
it does
should be.
not bother me nearly enough because that is like a romance novel. It's a romance fantasy novel, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, you just are
kind of
like,
what you
okay.
sign up for. Yeah.
But this is wildly not that.
Yeah, it's kind of fucking with our horizon of expectations. It's fucking with the context. It starts to get some of that cognitive dissonance. It's a weird little thing. So between the racism, the gratuitous nudity, and the confusion of genres, we'd give these chapters 0 out of 10.
They're not great. They're not great.
I hope everything I said makes sense. I feel like I'm not really
Sure.
on it today.
I think it did. Do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. I think I've said enough.
We've said enough.
I've had enough of these two.
I've had enough of us two. I've had enough of you.
Yeah, I've had enough of
Robert.
Jordan. My blog title this week was, Will I Vandalize Robert Jordan's Gravestone? Stay tuned.
Read and find out.
More at 10.
Buddy, why you do these things?
Just don't know. I just don't know.
We'll torment ourselves if we just constantly wonder why, I guess. So
That's true.
just have to
Robert
get
Jordan
through
is
this series.
like a distant, malevolent god.
He's up there or down there somewhere.
Laughing either way.
Yeah, either way. We're talking about his books, so he's happy.
That's true. He got his TV show. I don't know.
Oh, do you think he wanted a TV show?
I don't know. I was just gonna wonder that. Maybe he wouldn't be happy, but...
I mean, I know he wouldn't be happy because all of the people are people of,
Oh, you're
of
right.
color.
He'd be like,
I wrote them
a
as
black
white.
woman?
Excuse me? Excuse me? Also, my Rain and Swan kiss?
And he'd be
That
like,
was meant to be subtext!
Robert, you made it pretty fucking clear what those two were doing in the nighttime, so...
The nighttime.
Or the daytime.
Or
I don't mean
nighttime.
to limit them.
Thanks for listening if you stuck with us this long. If you weren't just like,
Uh,
I actually don't want to relive Faile's kidnapping arc, so click, skip episode. If
I
you're
would
still with us,
support,
yeah,
so.
I mean, do what you gotta do for your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we skipped Crossroads of... Dang
Path
it,
of
Path
Daggers.
of Daggers. I get those two mixed up so much.
well, it feels like the exact same things are happening in Crossroads of Twilight that happened in Path of Daggers. Am I reading the same book? Who's to say?
Yeah, it might be. It's just like a nightmare that you can't wake up from. Thanks for listening.
It's like Itachi's, what is his special?
Genjutsu?
Genjutsu, the one he just put on the Snake Man, where you just live
Oh.
the same loop over and
Is
over.
it
Izanagi?
Izanami and Izanagi?
Yeah, that's
Can't
what
remember which
Crossroads
one.
of Twilight is like. I just have to accept that I can't change fate, and then Itachi will free me.
I mean, it's like any Genjutsu, right? Because Itachi, made Kakashi be crucified for 3 days straight.
Yeah, listen,
Which was fucked up.
I have some, like, I
Itachi Uchiha did some things wrong.
yeah, like, I would mostly consider myself an Itachi Uchiha apologist, but that one he needs to go
That
to
one was unnecessary.
trial for. Yeah.
3 days, Itachi?
3, like, maybe you could have done, like, a minute. 1 stab.
Okay, I'm deleting that.
Sorry
whole
for the
Naruto
Naruto
sidebar.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Thank you to Glenna McKenzie for our theme song. Thanks to our patrons on Patreon and our followers on social media. Hope we've satisfied your quest for Path of Daggers info.
Yeah, I hope so too, because don't know how much more I can give you.
Yeah, that's it. It wasn't it was like a 10-minute discussion, and then we
Oh,
got...
I do have that funny video of you. Maybe I should post that.
Oh, don't post it. I keep referring to it as Crossroads of Twilight in it. It's so humiliating.
It's pretty funny.
You just keep being like, Path of Daggers. Do you have a sign?
Yeah, like right before we started recording this, I was watching a TikTok that was basically like, I'm pretty crazy and I think what you're doing is pretty fucked up, so maybe rein it in. And I meant to send it to one of my friends and I almost sent it to my dad. I caught myself like at the last minute, like the 5 seconds left in the game. I was like, oh, thank God, that is not the right person.
You beat the buzzer.
Yeah, a buzzer beater, because my dad, I don't know if my dad would even know how to open a
Yeah.
TikTok. But
Pretty
it
reliably,
would
I
have
can
been-
guess that he wouldn't.
a really tough one to try and explain.
Oh, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. Have a good week.
Gotta go eat some more crackers.
Don't freeze to death.
Oh, man.
Goodbye.